All In Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Tuesday, December 17th, right here on All In Horns, your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns. I'm Tanner Carlson. That is Jake Jimerson, and this is brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. And we have a couple of portal updates for everybody, and it is Clemson week. It's officially the start of college football playoff prep week for the Texas Longhorns and for the, six other teams that are playing in the first round, whatever the number is. We are going to go over some of the press conference that Steve Sarkisian had on Monday, going over some of this game and just the prep week of what the last week has looked like for the Texas Longhorns, the feel around the locker room, the awards that have been handed out to guys like Kelvin Banks, to Jahdae Barron, kind of what team morale has looked like. And so Steve Sarkisian, he really spoke on just a fluctuant of different topics yesterday afternoon. And so we'll kind of dive into what he talked about. Also, an injury update on three key offensive starters for you. We'll give a rundown on the AP All-American list and some snubs that have made an appearance and getting some recognition for the season that they have had. And we will also give you a quick update on other sports going around the campus, whether that be volleyball, men's basketball, women's basketball, you name it. We are going to give you just a quick little update on that, and then we will dive in to the matter at hand, which is the college football playoffs. And Jake, this will be the Texas Longhorns preparing for the first December home game at DKR ever played. That's kind of cool to think about. I mean, it makes sense, but it's kind of cool to think about.
I'd imagine it's all these teams' first December home games that are hosting. It's 7 other tems that are preparing other than Texas. It's a new format. I had to look it up. I'm not going to sit here and say I knew it was either. I knew it wasn't 6 because you can't have 7 teams playing in one weekend. But
that's true. Yeah,
I'm the accountant here.
Yeah, I've never claimed to be good at math, so I mean, I'm not upset that I got it wrong.
It's an exciting week. It's interesting following. It's interesting because I think you're going to have a team like Ohio State get their stadium taken over this weekend, and I think there's going to be a lot of Clemson fans in Austin. I think road teams are going to travel really well because I think some season ticket holders are going to have to sell their tickets because, like for Texas, you have plenty of season ticket holders who go to Westlake, or I'm trying to remember which schools it is that are in the state championship game. And some of those season ticket holders are either going to go to the state championship game or have kids that are playing in it and are going to be there because of that. And so they're going to sell their tickets. I'm sure Clemson fans will be quick to jump on it. And then I've just seen just on my For You tab, it's just everything college football. My algorithm is perfectly tuned for me. And Vol Twitter is they're posting the Ohio State ticket map and being like, these tickets are so cheap. It's so much cheaper than going to an actual Tennessee game at Tennessee. Every single person better be there. And I feel like a lot of these home teams are going to be in for a shock at how many of these road fans are going to travel to these games. So I'm very interested to see how these home crowds look like, what the environments are like. Is it like a typical regular season game as far as it being heavily favored to the home team, or are we going to see more of a 70-30 type split, more or less?
I want to preface what we talk about this week with me saying this, and this does not apply to Jake. It might apply to Jake, but it definitely applies to me, is that I think that we are going to get some sort of upset, whatever that looks like, whatever you consider an upset. I don't know what it is. I think that we have my upset meter might be sitting at like a 75%. Now, I'm not saying I know which team it is. I don't know if SMU can go into Penn State in 15-degree weather and win a game in December and against that offense and that defense. I don't know if they can. I don't think they can, but I also not entirely sure if Notre Dame is going to show up for a big game against an Indiana who has the #1 rush defense in the entire country. And Notre Dame wants to rely on running the ball with Riley Leonard. And can Indiana's defense force him to throw the ball and see a side of Notre Dame that we haven't seen before? And that's an interstate game. So like you said, Jake, there's going to be plenty of Indiana fans trying to get to that game, capable of getting to that game. And so which matchup works out best? The Clemson game sort of kind of concerns me. The deeper we look into it, the better of a matchup it feels for Texas, but it's a 5-12 game. It's supposed to feel that way. That doesn't mean Clemson isn't a program that has been built around big moments and big games under this coaching staff and this regime. So do I think that they're just going to come out and lay an egg? Absolutely not. So I want to preface this by saying I think there's going to be some sort of chaos in the matter. I also feel like at the same time, on the flip side, we could see all the favorites win by the exact spread that they're chosen to. If it's a double-digit spread, I could easily see that as well.
Yeah, I mean, every game is at least a touchdown spread as of recording. And you mentioned how it's a 5-12, but it's interesting looking at it. We'll dive more into this as the week goes on, but from a talent composite standing, and I know I bring this up fairly often, but it typically is a good reflection of who goes on to win national titles or who is at least competing for national titles at the end of season. Clemson's like the third or fourth best team in the entire playoff from a talent composite. Very even with Texas, as we'll go over later on. But it is an interesting matchup, just it being the first time Texas and Clemson have ever played. The Klubnik connection. I know a lot of Texas fans were very upset when he did not commit to Texas, though that was never the plan. He wanted to play for Clemson and for Dabo from the very beginning.
And if it wasn't them, it was
between the secondary and Klubnik too.
Very, very interesting. And if it wasn't Clemson, which again, like you said, it was probably always going to be Clemson as long as Clemson was interested in him. His parents went to Texas A&M. So his second option was probably going to be A&M if it wasn't Clemson. So, but yeah, Jake, I think that the secondary storyline that you're talking about, Andrew Makuba, who played against Klubnik, was in that same recruiting class as Klubnik coming into Clemson during that COVID year whenever they were, short rostered and they only had a select few players that were healthy at any given point in time. Andrew Makuba played wide receiver in practice and was catching passes from Cade Klubnik. So he has a very tight, interesting dynamic and relationship with the quarterback. And then Michael Taff on the other end played high school ball with him as his quarterback while he was playing a safety. And so very interesting ties. And Michael Taff has all the respect in the world for a guy like Cade Klubnik. He has done nothing but speak highly of that quarterback.
Texas must have media training, man. Their guys don't give other teams. Colin Simmons is the only one who gave another team a little bit of,
and it was OU.
And it was OU, and what he said came true. But hopefully that trend continues and Makuba catching passes from him.
That would be great.
I'd love for that to happen on Saturday.
Absolutely. Hey, let's give a quick update on other sports going on. Jake, you and I last Friday spoke on the Texas Volleyball Sweet 16 matchup against Creighton. You've probably already heard the news by now, but volleyball did fall to Creighton 3-1 in that Sweet 16 game. You and I were both watching it live. We were exchanging text messages as that game was happening. Creighton came out and just looked like the better team, quite frankly. I mean, it was a fast start for Creighton in every single set. And they made Texas play from behind essentially that entire match.
Yeah, Texas played from behind about 98% of that match. I mean, their one set win was a last second comeback. They were trailing, I think, 24-19, 24-20, and then scored all the way out to win. Almost did that in several sets. They always fought back. But at the end of the day, this Texas volleyball team was just a little inconsistent this year. And it's hard to win 3 straight titles. And this Texas volleyball team is not going anywhere. They are continuing to bring in talent. They have talent returning, and they're going to be right in the mix again next year. This year's a disappointment just because they've set the bar as, Final Four or bust at the point when you win 2 national titles in a row. But it's been a heck of a run for them. And honestly, they just lost to a very good team. Creighton not only is a very good team, but they were playing incredibly well. They were going to beat about anyone in the nation with how they were playing in that game.
Not only that, but it was interesting that the broadcast was talking about how Creighton, yes, had a better record than Texas in the regular season, but they were also the higher seed than Texas, and yet probably considered this one of the biggest upsets in the tournament as well at the same time.
It's like when if Alabama got beat by, Georgia, when they got beat by Georgia, and Georgia was probably the better team, but it was still a huge upset because they couldn't because just people hadn't seen Alabama lose. It's when you have a team that's winning multiple national titles, has been to other national titles and several top fours all over the past 5 to 10 years. And then you have a Creighton who's never made it. I think they'd only made it to the final 8 teams, I believe, one other time. It's very unlikely. And volleyball is a sport that the top teams are really hard to beat because it's chalk a lot of the time. And you look at the Final Four, and Creighton did end up losing to,
I was curious
to Penn State, 3-2. It was a 5-set game. If you compare it, like Nebraska, they swept Wisconsin. On the other end, Pittsburgh swept Kentucky, Louisville 3-1 over Stanford. So it was the closest of those Elite Eight matches to get into. I don't know if it's called Elite Eight in volleyball. That's the terminology.
That is what we know, and that is a very simple way of everybody else understanding where that is. Yeah.
But yeah, you look at it. I mean, Creighton, they competed the best out of any of the other teams playing against the 1 seed, and that's not surprising to me. I thought they had a chance to beat Penn State just because they played better volleyball than Texas, and that's pretty hard to do against this Texas team, other than during that one skid they went on during the season.
Well, that is going to do it for the volleyball season. They are, done. Their season has been wrapped up. They will have, like Jake said, some returners coming back. They've got incoming talent. This is not the end of Texas volleyball. Obviously, they will be around trying to make another run to another national championship next year. Moving on to men's basketball, Jake. They've won 2 straight following the loss to UConn. They've beat New Mexico State and Arkansas Pine Bluff in 2 blowout wins. Trey Johnson did not play against Arkansas Pine Bluff. He had a hip injury. Any update on that? It was very vague, any type of report that I've gotten, almost kind of precautionary. Didn't really want to, emphasize or extend any type of injury that he's already dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, Arkansas Pine Bluff's terrible. So they if he even is like it's sore, they're not going to play him. But the latest I read was it was day to day, which sounds like it's probably not anything that's going to affect SEC play, but we also don't know for sure. So don't quote me on that as being fact. I'm just going off what I've read, and in college sports, and even in the pros, injury talk is very vague. Texas did score 121 points in that game against Arkansas, by the way.
It was led by Cody, who set a career high with like 20 points coming off the bench. And so got a lot of production from guys that you don't typically hear from, which I think that is the purpose of games like playing against an Arkansas Pine Bluff, is you get some of those deeper depth players playing bigger minutes. They have a bigger role within the game, and maybe they catch, a little bit of a heater. They catch a stride, if you will, and maybe they find themselves getting some minutes against a team like Texas A&M, who's coming up right around the corner to start SEC play.
The start of SEC play for Texas is, we've talked about how the SEC is been going to be this big downstep in basketball. Well, leave it for this year. And, you could say the football side was maybe a little bit weaker this year than other years. So basketball's balancing that out, because all of a sudden the Big 12 is hardly anywhere to be found in the top 10 teams. And the SEC is just all over the place. Texas opens up SEC play. Here's their first 4 games: at number 12, Texas A&M, home against number 2, Auburn, home against number 1, Tennessee, at number 14, Oklahoma. Oh, and then I'll go ahead and go one more game deep, at number 7, Florida.
Yeah, and Oklahoma
so
and Florida
5 games. 3 of the teams are top 7, and all of them are top 15.
And I believe Oklahoma and Florida are still undefeated, I believe, at this point in the season. 10-0 is last time I checked.
Oklahoma is, and Florida is as well.
Yeah.
And they do have some solid. And A&M's they started the season, lost to UCF. I think a lot of people, including me, just kind of went, oh, they're not going to be any good again this year. But they've racked up some, better quality wins than Texas has as of late, taking down Purdue and Creighton. And so that's not going to be, right now I would favor A&M. Right now I'd pick Texas to be 0-5 to open SEC play based off their play on the court.
Yeah. And I don't think you're entirely off base by, throwing that out there, Jake. And to be completely honest with you, we will come out with a kind of a basketball midseason preview, if you will, just because football has been taking up so much of our airtime. that we haven't really been able to give a season prediction on where we think Texas is going to land come conference play, Jake. As it stands right now, I'm going to say bottom 5, bottom 4 of the league as it sits right now. I mean, unless something drastically changes.
And we did give our early season expectations, not from a direct, this is going to be their record. Our expectations were top 4 in the SEC. And maybe that changes a little bit because the SEC is a little bit better than people were thinking it was going to be. But quite frankly, this Texas basketball team has not looked good. They've looked like not an NIT team at best.
Yeah.
And that's unacceptable from Rodney Terry and company. And if they don't find a way to start playing better basketball, they're going to find themselves in an 0-5 hole to open up conference play, because if they don't play better, they're not beating any of those teams. They're going to have to play better basketball to beat any of those teams. And if they don't, they're going to be 0-5, and Texas is going to be conducting a coaching search pretty quickly on the basketball side of things.
And on the women's side of things, Jake, things going very well for them. 10-1 to start the season off. However, their lone loss came against a top 10 team on the road against Notre Dame was 80-70. That happened a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week and a half ago. But they have won 3 straight since that game, and they start SEC play January 2nd against OU. So the men's team will take on A&M in College Station, and the women's team will take on Oklahoma in Norman to start off SEC play. And so both teams starting off with their heated rival, within the conference. But Jake, this women's team, about sitting at expectations of what we were kind of thinking going into the season. That Notre Dame game would have liked to see, but it's a road game against a top 10 team. Notre Dame's got a great women's program over there, so I'm not beating them up about it.
It was also an overtime loss, and Texas just shot terribly in that game. They missed a lot of open shots in overtime. They kind of looked like the men's team. They scored the first bucket, and then they didn't score again. That overtime score summary is just a flat line. And so they didn't shoot the ball that well. They had 23 turnovers in that game. And it was a tough road environment. I actually caught the whole second half and overtime of that game. And there was nothing that was overly concerning. They lost to a good top 10 team on the road. They have a lot of young players. They're going to keep getting better. Coach Schaefer's a very good basketball coach. I have no doubt this women's team is going to be competing for a Final Four, if not a national championship this season.
Yeah, not worried about them whatsoever. All right, Jake, that's going to do it for our other Texas sports updates for you, if you will. Now, a quick update on the transfer portal. Sadir Mitchell has officially re-entered into the transfer portal. He was never officially in the transfer portal. We then reported, hey, he's going to stay. That's a great, good player to kind of keep your eye on moving forward. And now he said, nope, I'm actually going to officially enter that transfer portal. And some of his hesitation, Jake, what's the reason why?
Snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap. That's been his whole career at Texas, right?
It is, yeah.
There's rumors from the second he stepped on campus that he wasn't going to stay. He was going to transfer in the middle of season 1. He was going to transfer at the end of season 1. He was off the team in the middle of this season. Then he turned a corner. The light had turned on. Then he was transferring. Then he was staying. And now he is. And he never entered his name in the transfer portal. The first time I've seen a lot of people say, oh, Sarkisian didn't stand to his role. Well, he didn't enter his name. The rule is if you enter your name in the transfer portal, you're not going to be coming back to Texas. You may be able to stay on through the playoffs, depending your situation, like a Justice Finkley, who's entered the transfer portal. We'll get on him in a second. But it sucks. I would have liked him to stay for depth. But also if he was just expecting to have a starting job, just automatically, he's not at the right program. That's just not how Texas operates.
I don't know if this is the true story or not. This is all speculation on my part. So don't say, hey, Tanner on All In Horns reported this. No, this is just speculation of when he saw the amount of players going into the transfer portal to start at the defensive line position. And he said, oh man, I've got myself a shoe-in as a rotational player, whether that be a starter or just a rotation guy onto the second team. I'm a shoe-in for these playoffs and moving forward. And then that's not the case come practice and come the depth chart. And he's exactly where he has been. And he's probably thinking, oh, never mind. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. Again, that's my speculation. That's not an actual team report that I've gotten, an actual response from by anybody.
Well, and he sees Texas immediately going after a defensive lineman in the transfer portal, and a talented one at that. And there's talks of them wanting 2 to 3 more, regardless if he was staying. It sucks because that's one of those guys you were hoping could develop and become a good player next year and rotate in. But at the end of the day, he's not going to dictate how good the Texas Longhorns are next year. Texas was not going to be assuming he was going to be a rotational player next year when he hasn't been this year. So they were going to attack the portal aggressive regardless. This just probably changes the logistics of it to they're going to for sure get at least 3, but they're probably going to try to get 4 out of the portal at the end of the day. Especially with that spring portal you get, they have plenty of time to pick up guys, and they'll have a lot of young talent to start developing as well.
So guys coming on and signing, or at least committing, as defensive tackle from Purdue, Cole Brevard. He's got 1 year of eligibility left. You talk about big humans, 6'3", 333 pounds. Played well against Oklahoma State. Jake, I'll let you get into that here in just a moment. And then also signing a linebacker from Arkansas, Brad Spence. He just completed his 2nd season. And a punter, Jake. We've got a punting competition. I'm going to screw up this name. Maybe you'll know it better than I am. Jack Boemeister. He's got 1 year of eligibility left. He's an Australian coming from Utah.
Yeah, he's from down under. I'm not going to be able to help you on that.
But Texas, with some success at that Australian punting school coming, I think Texas was one of the first ones to kind of dip their toe into it. Obviously, Michael Dixon coming from there and kind of making that a much larger name than it was back then.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the punter a little longer than I normally would, just because I saw a lot of discourse surrounding this of people going, Kern averaged, I think, around 39 point something yards a punt, and Jack, whatever last name, averaged right around 44.7. And you go, well, that's not that big of a difference. Well, the hang time average difference, if you dive into it, is substantially better, which is a big problem with Kern. I mean, when I was watching his punts at seeing it in person, you're like, wow, that ball is not getting very high. It's not in the air very long. And it looks like my high school punter did. And I played at a 3A high school, so in Texas. So that's not good enough.
No.
Also, I saw people, well, he plays in Utah. So, it's a mile above sea level. His longest punt of the season was in Florida, 62 yards against Central Florida. So this is just a pure upgrade and a much needed upgrade. We mentioned they were going to go go for a punter in the portal. This is also a 1 year rental, so it gives Kern time to develop. If he wants to enter the portal, I'm sure they will let him go. But this gives Kern the option to sit back and develop and try to strengthen that leg, and then be a good punter and kind of have a redemption story. But this year, the punting has been against Georgia, especially just a game changer.
Can I talk real quick, Jake, on the amount of net punt yardage between the two? I watched a 10-minute long highlight reel on the Utah punter. Yes, I watched a 10-minute highlight reel on the punter. The majority of his punts coming from probably Utah's own 40-yard line, 40, 50-yard line, around that area in terms of where the line of scrimmage. And so he's probably punting from the 30, 35 on a regular basis. That means he's averaging getting it to about, at minimum, the 25, 20-yard line, if not consistently inside the 20, backing up the team in negative field position to help the Utah defense. There's a big difference right there, where as Kern probably punting from his 20 is getting it to the 50-yard line, this guy is getting it from the 20 to the opposing team's 20.
Yeah, and he's shown he can boom a kick, right? Yeah, I mean, he can boom a kick. And to further your point there, he has 23 punts inside the 20-yard line. Kern has 7.
Yeah.
And Texas has made plenty of punts from the middle of the field where a drive stalled out, or they had penalties kill a drive. And then he ends up getting a punt that somehow he doesn't pin them inside the 20. Even just watching him do warm-up punts at the Arkansas game, I was amazed at him trying to do corner punts and just not being able to do them in practice with no one, pressuring him. That's the most time we'll ever spend talking about a punter on
Hopefully.
this podcast. I promise. Hopefully.
Yeah.
And on Cole Brevard, I'm pretty excited about him. His best tape was against Ohio State, or some of his best tape. He had a sack or a sack and a half in that game. He's not your typical he's not a pass rushing defensive lineman, but to me, he's a better version of Bill Norton. He's going to swallow up blocks, but he can also shed off the blocks. Norton is more of just he's going to take up space, but he's not going to really be able to get off a block and make a play. Brevard can, and he was an honorable mention all Big Ten guy, which when you're playing at the worst team in the Big Ten, that means a little bit more than if you're playing for Ohio State and you get honorable mention.
Getting any type of recognition at Purdue in terms of all conference means you're doing something. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's a big get, and that's just a good way to get the portal started. The portal is a long process, especially when these coaches know who guys are that are potentially entering the portal, because agents talk to these schools, and schools tamper as well. I'm not going to say that's the case for Texas because I'm biased, but agents will talk to schools, and I'm sure they know of a handful of guys that are in the playoffs that are potentially going to enter. So schools are going to be patient, but for them to get the first guy they get on campus, that's a great start to the portal season.
And this is a conversation for another day, Jake, but the backup quarterback for Penn State entering the transfer portal and will not be reporting with the team right before their playoff game, blamed the timing of the transfer portal on that. I don't know if that's a great excuse or not. Me personally, I don't think it is. But again, that's a conversation that we can have in discussion of the transfer portal moving on, because I believe that conversation will probably be around 30 minutes, and we're already pushing our time here already. Brad Spence, the Arkansas linebacker. This is going to be a very talented linebacking room moving forward into next season. Where he fits in, I'm not entirely sure. I've seen him kind of line up more so on the edge. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of where he fits in with this Texas Longhorn linebacking group, especially kind of making some plays, at least to start off in the special teams unit. And so Texas already adding some depth, and I think that's really where the transfer portal is going to play its largest role at Texas anyway. For other teams, it's rebuilding their entire roster through the transfer portal. I think for Texas, when you're making, back-to-back runs to the college football playoffs, it's more so getting those depth guys, because depth is crucial. And now you're getting guys who are starting at other Power 4 conference teams now as your depth players and your special teams guys. And I think that makes a huge, huge difference when you can fill your roster with those caliber of guys.
Yeah, depth and rebuilding certain position groups at times.
Yeah.
Kind of like Texas is going to have to do a little bit with that defensive line position group. But at the same time, it's the linebacker grab, not only a very talented player who's going to help them in the run defense. I think he'll be able to play in some of the early downs, and then have LaFau come in and a second and long or third where there's going to be more pass drop situations. But it just adds more competitive depth to a room that didn't have quite enough numbers, but has a ton of quality. And now you just added another number that is also quality. And just bolstering that depth, like you mentioned, it makes it not only competitive within the team, but it makes it to where one injury or two injuries doesn't necessarily derail your season.
Jake, Justice Finkley, you mentioned it earlier that he will enter the transfer portal. Him and Savea will actually remain on the team, practicing with the team after entering into the transfer portal. Their situation's a little bit more unique, as they will be bodies provided in terms of depth on this defensive line moving forward. They will probably not see any action unless there is a just drastic need in terms of injuries or what have you moving forward into the college football playoffs. But they will be on the team until, if Texas wins the national championship, they're going to be on the sideline with their guys in full uniform, ready to go. And so I think that is a numbers game for Texas. It also shows to, a guy like Justice Finkley, who has committed 3 seasons of his college football career to Texas, and kind of allowing him this last little stretch, this last run to see, hey, if we do need you, we're going to call upon you, and we trust you to go out there and make a play.
Yeah, he's been a rotational player for Texas. He was playing a little bit more the last couple seasons, but the edge room has just become a position of strength now. And it's just becomes a numbers game at that point. But Justice Finkley's a Longhorn through and through.
And he's a fan favorite.
He's been a culture guy. His family is awesome. His mom is on Twitter, and she's one of those Twitter moms that you love, not so much like some others. Bonnie Thompson. But I'm blocked by her, by the way.
Oh, nice.
And so yeah,
You think she listens to the podcast?
Bonnie Thompson, no. Miss Finkley, maybe. She's a lovely lady, and she's been very positive towards Texas and through this whole process. And the whole fan base has been very positive towards Justice Finkley, and rightfully so. He's a Texas graduate, by the way. Yeah. He's very intelligent. I believe it's his mom or his father or both are a doctor. And so, yeah, there's very high IQ, much smarter than either of us combined.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, yeah, he just wants to go somewhere where he's going to be able to be a starter. And quite frankly, he's earned that right. Yeah. He'll be remembered as a Longhorn.
I think a great fit would be like a UTSA, just step on campus day one, be a day one starter and have an immediate impact on a defensive wherever it is that you go,
Could be an all conference type guy at that level. I mean, he's a talented player. Just Texas now has NFL guys who are just going to be top 4 round draft picks in the NFL at edge.
Right. All right, Jake, real quickly, All-Americans that were announced. Texas had 5 All-Americans announced. First teamers, Calvin Banks and Jahdae Barron, winners of the Jim Thorpe and the Lombardi Award, and then also the Outland Trophy Award, the first player in Texas since, who was it that had won the Outland and the Lombardi?
It was a long time ago. I think his name was Tavondre Sweat.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, Tavondre Sweat, that's right. Last year it happened with back-to-back seasons for the Texas Longhorns. Calvin Banks gets the Lombardi and the Outland Trophy. And so very great, prestigious awards for the first teamers. Second teamers, Alfred Collins, who was an SEC snub. Anthony Hill is a second teamer who led the SEC in tackles and yet still managed to be second team. And then Michael Taft, who was an SEC snub as well, getting second team All-American honors. So congratulations to those guys. 2 wrongs righted in the AP All-American.
Yeah, something's wrong when you got guys on the All-American team and are not anywhere to be seen on the All-Conference team. That people have talked about a bias towards Texas because of the schedule, and we don't really know how those schedules were created. There was a clear bias against Texas in the All-Conference. And this just further proves the obvious to Texas fans, but it makes it indisputable to the people who were saying, oh, Michael Taft wasn't that good. No, to say he wasn't at minimum second team all SEC guy, really a first team all SEC guy this year is preposterous.
And not that I really hone in on PFF ratings, because I think that especially in college, the PFF player ratings are a little skewed because it's so hard to go based on that. But Jahdae Barron, the highest ranked secondary Jim Thorpe Award winner since the award was announced in PFF, was actually rating players back in 2014 when they first began. So tied for the highest ranking on a season for Jahdae Barron. So he will definitely be a first round pick. And like Sark has said, he has made himself a lot of money in one season, going from a potential late round 6th, 7th round guy to what will likely be a first round, if not early second round guy in the NFL draft this year. So Jake, anything else on All-Americans before we kind of move on? We need to move this episode along a little bit.
It's just great for Jahdae Barron, for the pitch that coaches can make to players. You now had Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, and Jahdae Barron, all as clear examples of guys who went from being a late 5th to 7th round pick to being top 2 round guys at worst. Tavondre Sweat should have gone higher, as we've seen with his play in the NFL. And so it's just a great pitch to give to some of these guys who are thinking about going pro, but would be a middle to late round pick, and go, look, if you come back, we're going to give you the opportunity to play yourself into a first round pick.
Absolutely. Jake, it is playoff week. Quick question for you. What does Texas need to improve on from this season to go on a stretch and win the national championship? Quick points. We'll kind of run through this as quickly as we can, but also not rush it at the same time.
Yeah, for me, turnovers on the offensive end of the ball, just not turning over the ball. Their turnover margin is not near as good as it should be for being a team that has taken the ball away the most out of anyone in the country. Beating Georgia would be helpful.
That would help because that would mean a national championship.
Yes, if they play Georgia again, they're going to need to beat them. That would be a national championship. Uh, and O-line consistency from a week-to-week basis, which also to be more specific, I would love to see, and I think they're going to need to do this to win a national championship, use Arch more in the condensed areas, as we have talked about. I don't think he should be the starter. I still think Quinn should be the starter. He will be the starter, but I do think he should be. But that doesn't mean you can't have your cake and eat it too. And to me, that is using Arch in those condensed areas because he can run the ball. You can still run your normal offense and get passes off. I just think it'll open things up more in the red zone, especially in situations where you're going against a team that has shown they can just stop your standard running game with the running backs, because that's when the red zone really goes downhill.
Yeah, and Jake, that is a perfect segue into my improved upon points for Texas to go on and win a national championship would be efficiency and really just capitalizing when you get into the red zone. And it's not even so much the red zone, it's really that 30-yard line that Quinn and this offense seems to sputter. And then it's a holding penalty, or then it's a sack. And now you're pushing Bert Auburn, who has already had a shaky season, into a more difficult field goal situation or even a punting situation. And so if you could kind of just get it settled in within that 30-yard range, you're probably getting more points because you're getting easier field goal attempts as well. So it's not even just getting it into the end zone. It's just not pushing yourself out of scoring range for me personally anyway, because this defense and this team is good enough to consistently get there, which is another point of mine, consistency. More so on the offensive side of the ball, but consistency. I'm not so much worried about the defense. This more so applies to the offense, but it's consistency, not turning the ball over, consistency, not getting penalties, consistency, not taking sacks in untimely situations. It's those sorts of things. But you see Texas move the ball and they're moving it down, and they're having a great drive. And then all of a sudden, one or two plays sputter and the drive is completely shut down. And it's like, come on, guys, like we can't let that happen. And it completely ruin all mojo that we've got moving on. And then lastly, again, special teams. That's been a point of emphasis, getting in, obviously, a punter into the transfer portal, coming in to compete with Kern for the upcoming season, but also Bert Auburn. He point blank, I mean, he missed 2 field goals that could have prevented Texas from even getting to overtime against Georgia and winning that SEC championship game. So,
yeah, and to be clear, the red zone problems are not all on Quinn. I am not saying that. I'm just saying I think Arch opens up a little bit more in those exact
I would also just not
situations.
make it so obvious that Arch is a red zone guy. Throw him in during the drive on your own 40-yard line, or throw him in, for just a couple of plays here and there, and just do like a short yardage, RPO type play where he still has the option to throw the ball or hand it off or take it upon himself. That's perfectly fine. Even if you're driving down the field, it doesn't just have to be inside the red zone or inside the opposing team's 30-yard line. Mix it up a little bit, and I would like to see Arch more frequently. I'm not saying once a drive, but I am saying once or twice in a quarter.
Yeah, I'm sticking with what I said. I want to see him be the all-time quarterback when you get inside the 30-yard line. Quinn is your quarterback the rest of the time when you get inside the 30, and it's not because you run a Wildcat offense. You run your normal offense, but you just add in the threat of a QB run. You add in a read option that's also an RPO. You can add in some new plays, kind of like what Clemson runs, where they do an RPO for the quarterback. He threatens to run it and ends up throwing it. I think you can open up a lot, and I would just do it in the condensed areas. I don't think you're not hiding anything to me, but just playing him in the red zone, because you can still run your full offense.
Yeah.
But that's just how I feel. And I'm not saying that guaranteed fixes it, but at this point, they've had a red zone issue as the season has come to an end. And why not at least try it when it's win or go home? You quite literally have nothing to lose at this point.
Have you, I mean, I know you have, Jake, but have we ever seen a quarterback that is vulture potential like Arch Manning in your type of situation? Maybe a a Tyrant Swoops, an 18-wheeler package, maybe at that point.
Yeah, except for you can actually throw the ball. I'm not even going to make any of those comparisons. Also, when you said vulture, my mind just went Jalen Hurts because of vulturing all of Saquon's touchdowns that might cost him an MVP.
Yeah, every touchdown that comes
Throw
from
Manning in there. Do a tush push on 4th and 1.
Man, Tolbert, baby. There was nobody better than stealing LaDainian Tomlinson's touchdowns for the San Diego Chargers.
The vulture.
Back in the day. The vulture. All right, man.
The one who the nickname was coined.
It came from Tolbert. So anyway, Jake, that's let's go ahead and move along just a little bit. We'll finish and wrap up the show here with some comments that Coach Steve Sarkisian made in his press conference earlier on Monday. Going into the rest week, he said, look, we had no football activities Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe a little bit of a film study on individual players. That was entirely up to them. There were no team meetings, no team workouts. If you wanted guys to come in and work out and hit the weight room, run a couple routes, do some mental reps on their own time, that was completely up to the players, but there was nothing team organizational wise. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they started up practice on Thursday, Friday. We started implementing the game plan going into this week. And he said the energy and the vibes were very, very good on Thursday. This was a re-energized team. Mentally, they were able to get that SEC loss behind them. They were able to kind of reward some of the players who were recognized nationally, whether that be a Kelvin Banks or some of the All-Americans that were announced as well. And so that boosted team morale as well. He said that this team is very energized and ready to go.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. These guys have earned a little bit of a break. These aren't NFL players. I know they get paid now, but they're still college students at the end of the day, and they deserve a little bit of a break. I guarantee you, any guys who play significant snaps were watching film. I know Anthony Hill said he was watching film, so I'm sure plenty of them were watching film, but just to get a break, to rest. Everyone at this point in the season is playing with some type of bruise or pain or just uncomfortability. And so it's good for these guys to get a break. And I can imagine how much it rejuvenated these guys. We mentioned how playing and losing in a conference championship is about the worst case scenario. It was much needed for these guys to get a break this week, get fully focused for Clemson, because to anyone on the team, to fans, to the coaches, this isn't just preparing for Clemson. This is preparing to play, 4 more games.
No, you're exactly right, Jake. And I think that was something that was very important to Sark to implement for the team and for the team to kind of know that. So he did talk about the turnovers and the red zone woes. He was asked very bluntly by reporters about those kind of situations that came from the SEC championship game, even going into the Texas A&M game and other games towards the end of the season where maybe the team sputtered out come the red zone. And he said, look, it comes down to play calling. We need to find more balance between the run versus the pass and establish that on the field so it becomes a threat. Jake, my question to you is, with those comments from Sark saying that it falls on play calling, which would be on him, is he protecting his quarterback, Quinn Ewers? Is he talking, hey, we're going to implement maybe something personnel-wise with Arch Manning? Or is he really just saying, look, we need to call better plays on the field?
Why not all of the above? I think there's been a mixture. I think, everyone wants to blame play calling. Everyone always wants to blame the coach when anything goes wrong, or the quarterback. But at the end of the day against Georgia, they could not run the football. And that takes away that threat. And that's why they went more pass heavy in the red zone, because they were trying to score touchdowns and running it for 1 or 2 yards. As you saw, fans all season, Texas would not run the ball well for a while. Then they would start to run the ball well. And when they weren't running the ball well, and he would stop running it for a little bit, you'd be like, why are you giving up on the run? And then against the Georgia game, he tried to stick with the run to keep a balance. And all I see on social media is, why did he keep running the football?
The play calling was terrible. Yeah, that's what cost us the game.
And at the end of the day, it's execution. When you're not able to run the ball for more than a couple of yards of carry, when all season you've been, especially at the end of the season, able to run with more success. that really hurts your ability to call plays in the red zone. And then you get a holding penalty, and then you're behind the chains. And so I think he's defending the players, but Sark's also a guy who's always going to take responsibility. He watches and obsesses over film more than anyone else, and he's going to put it on himself to find a way to improve this team. And that's what I love about Sark, and that's why he has improved as a head coach, as a play caller, as an offensive coordinator every single season that he has been at Texas.
Yeah, and that even came back with the Casey Thompson days whenever he was talking about, there were times where he was saying, look, we need some better execution on the field, but he would never go out and say it. But what he was saying, I can only call the plays. The players have to go out and actually perform the plays. He was saying it without saying it. But Jake, he did give an injury update as well. 3 key offensive players moving forward, not only for this Clemson game, but for the remainder of the college football playoffs. Quinn, he was out of the ankle brace on Thursday, their first day back in practice. Quinn, as he says, Quinn has felt his best in a while. Everyone has their bumps and bruises at this point of the season. And so I would say, with that little last remark of everybody has their bumps and bruises at this point in the season, Quinn is not 100%, but he is good enough to take off that ankle brace, and he's good enough to, continue practicing. Yeah,
maybe you should keep the brace on, because he was playing really good football for the most part with that brace on. But that's a good sign. It sounds like Kelvin Banks is also, he even said that he probably kept Kelvin Banks out a little too long. I don't think that is the case. You can never be too safe with a player like that when you have a postseason ahead. And so it sounds like he'll be back. Isaiah Bond's the one where it sounds a little bit more ominous, where he's going to do everything he can do to get on the field. To me, that screams doubtful for Clemson. And quite frankly, if he's going to play injured and play like he did against Georgia, you're better off with sitting him out for a Clemson game. For an Arizona State game, if you get there. I know I'm getting ahead of myself there, but if you could get him fully healthy for, a semifinal and a championship type game, I think you take your chances without him, because if you're getting him on the field, not playing 100% and not able to give full effort and not able to run routes effectively, there's not much of a point of having him out there when you have other guys who can come in and make plays.
Yeah, and as much of a green light as we got from a Quinn Ewers and a Kelvin Banks, we probably are getting more of a yellow, kind of pushing the edge of a
yellow,
red light.
Like 2 seconds before the yellow, where you're going to go, I'm going to break here and stop, because it's going to be red.
Are these cameras going to catch me, and am I going to get a ticket later in the mail? Sort of yellow to red light with Isaiah Bond. He did say he's going to try to give it everything he's got. That tells me that he's not obviously playing up to his, the healthiest he's been all season. And we saw that in the Georgia game. He was more of a detriment and more of a liability to the team than he was an asset.
We've seen that he's been playing hurt for some time. His production dropping off a cliff from the middle of the season on is directly related to injury. And I'll be very
interested to see postseason, when the season's all said and done, what his kind of final injury report is going to be, even going into the draft and things of that nature, because it will come out when the season's over, officially what he was dealing with and for how long. I wouldn't be surprised if it was even by, that bye week after Vanderbilt, going into that final stretch of the season.
Yeah, it's like when the NHL team gets done with the hockey playoffs, and you hear fans complaining about how certain players playing, and then you see at the end they were playing with 3 broken bones, a cracked open brain, all this ridiculous stuff that would be fatal for most regular people. Right. Yeah, I feel like Bond's probably going through quite a bit of different stuff, not only just ankle.
Drew Brees playing with 12 broken ribs or something like that. What was
punctured lung? Tony Romo with a punctured lung.
Yeah, right. That I feel like is going to be something along the lines of even Quinn Ewers. Whenever he was injured through the middle of the season, and even this last stretch, it's probably worse than just an ankle. So
say what you want about Quinn. He's been tough this year.
Absolutely has. So, all right, Jake, that's going to do it for Tuesday's episode. Again, those are your portal updates. This is Clemson week. We are going to do a deep dive tomorrow into Texas Clemson, something everybody has been waiting for. Jake and I, myself included, we have been kind of pushing ourselves away from talking Texas Clemson too much, even going in from last week into this week, but now it is game time, and it is all right here on All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. Like, share, subscribe to the channel. Get your updates right here on YouTube. We drop these episodes Tuesday through Friday at noon, and then Saturday immediately following the game. This game will be played on TNT, so don't go searching for it. It's a TNT game or on Max, depending on whatever you have or whatever you want to stream. And so don't want to miss out on that, but we will have an immediate reaction following the Clemson game as well on Saturday. So for Jacob Jimerson, I'm Tanner Carlson. This is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns. And as always, hook 'em.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.